Good evening. Just double checking all my settings here. I am live. It is January 2nd, 2026, and this is the Gem State Report. Let's get started. Hello, my name is Brian Almon of the Gem State Chronicle, and this is the Gem State Report for Friday, January 2nd, in the year of our Lord, 2026. I hope you're all having a happy new year. I hope your year is off to a good start. Forgive my sniffles. I'm still a little congested, caught whatever this crazy flu that's going around is. I've had it the entire Christmas break, but I'm still here. A couple of the nights I felt like I might not be, but I made it through. I'm here, and we're ready to go. Tonight, I don't have any interviews for you. It's just me, but I have some clips. I have some information. This Somali daycare fraud scam from Minnesota that's taken the entire conservative media world by storm. We have our own questions here in Idaho, and I'll talk about those. And that's really the main focus today, because it kind of touches on everything, doesn't it? It touches on immigration and refugee resettlement, which is a big issue. It touches on government handouts and subsidies, another big issue. Touches on, equal protection under the law, because it, seems like some people are getting more access to subsidies than others. So we'll talk about all that. Here, I'm going to go make sure that this is live on all the platforms. It's, Gem State Chronicle on X is live. Let's repost it so more people can see it. Let's go over to Facebook, make sure we are live there as well. Hope you're all doing well. Having a good new year. There we go. Live now. And go grab the YouTube one. Get a shareable link and throw that in a few other places. Throw that up on a Substack note. Make sure I spell it right. Bam. And bam. Okay. Make sure you go to gemstatechronicle.com. You can click the subscribe button up near the top to put in your email. It goes through Substack, and you won't miss a single post of mine. I'm actually trying something out new. If you're watching this, give this a try. Go to gemstatechronicle.com on your mobile device, and you will go down to the little share button, whatever it is, depending on if you're Android or Apple, where it brings up all the options for you to copy it or to send it to someone, and go down to where it says add to home screen. And that will create a web app on your phone home screen for the Gem State Chronicle. And from there, you can just tap it and come in without all the stuff that the mobile browser has, the address bar and stuff. And then also, once you do that, there will appear a little bell icon in the bottom right corner. Tap that and say yes to whatever pops up, subscribe, allow, whatever, and you'll get notifications. So if you want to see when I post a press release or a guest opinion or a new post of mine, you get a little notification on your phone. It's really cool. I've been beta testing it for about 2 weeks now. I'm still working out one or two kinks here, but it is almost ready for prime time. So that, go ahead and try that out. You can help me beta test it and let me know if you run into any issues. Hopefully by the time the session starts in a week and 3 days, it will be all hammered out and ready to go. So let's share my screen so I can tell you what I've been talking about. Oh goodness, I have too many tabs up here. There we go. Let's flip this around. There we go. Someday I'll just be able to have the resources to hire a producer to do all this behind the scenes so I can just talk to you. But that's okay. I hope you don't mind bearing with me here. So, gemstatechronicle.com, like I said, click the subscribe button up here. Remember that there's all sorts of other things here. Resources. I'll update this for 2026 legislation soon. The committee daily summary. Register to vote if you haven't already. Idaho Freedom Index, the LLC lookup. This is pretty helpful, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Lobbyist lookup, see who's getting paid to talk to your legislators. Over there, different organizations who are doing stuff in this world, different outlets who report on things from a conservative perspective. Of course, Idaho Insider, if you haven't checked that out, you need to. It is your one-stop shop for information about your elected officials. It's the legislative branch is the one that's most fleshed out. For example, you can come down here and just see a list of all the legislators. You can click here and look at them by district. If you don't know what district you're in, you can click this button and put in your address and you'll find out. So you come over here, I'm in District 14, and there's my 3 legislators. And what's fun is this is all dynamically generated, so if we get some changes next year with the new elections, it will update to match. It also shows you a map. District 14 is Eagle, which is this little footstool here, and then all of Gem County, which is really big. It goes all the way up here to Adams County, almost to McCall. So in any case, what is new? So if you didn't see it, it really started in November. Well, check that. Let's go back further. For the last 20 years or so, 25 years even, a lot of Somali refugees have been settling in Minnesota. And I'd say about 10 years ago, conservatives started to notice that they were potentially engaged in various scams or fraudulent activities to get money from the federal government through various subsidies, state government as well. The Powerline blog guys, Scott Johnson and those guys, they're from Minnesota and they've been following this for years. But it's not really gotten much attention outside of the conservative world. Now, there was some indictments, actually under the Biden administration, I believe, of a program called Feeding Our Future, which was a COVID lockdown era free lunch program. And it turns out that, you'd get these groups, mostly consisting of Somali immigrants and refugees, but not all, who were essentially billing the government for feeding all these children that didn't exist. And they actually got some indictments out of that one. But anyway, so that's it's been something that we've talked about in the conservative media world for a long time. But even the Feeding Our Future scandal didn't really get a lot of mainstream attention. It wasn't until November when there were some folks, I forget who it was, but they broke it first. And then Christopher Rufo and his associate published it in City Journal. And then the New York Times picked it up. And what really blew it open was when this YouTuber named Nick Shirley started looking down the list of some of the places that were suspect. And he started going there and finding out that some of them didn't even exist. And that's, of course, where you get like the picture in the thumbnail I used of the Quality Leering Center. They couldn't even spell the sign right. Let's spell the word right on the sign. And so, he found a lot of places that were very questionable, places where they had multiple daycares registered in the same building, essentially, and no children. Now, of course, the left-wing media has come out and said, oh, well, he came outside of working hours, or, they were off that day, or it was the holiday, or whatever. They're running interference, trying to justify it, trying to go after the messenger. They're already, left-wing media is already going after Nick Shirley. I'm sure, Keith Ellison, the radical far-left Muslim Attorney General of Minnesota, is going to try and find some reason to charge him. So hopefully he's prepared for that. But that really seemed to blow it open. And people in other states started looking into their own daycare subsidies and finding some questionable stuff. Over in Ohio, finding, dozens of daycares registered at the same address, collecting federal subsidies or state subsidies. And so here in Idaho, the first one I wrote was this one over here, Raising Questions. I don't want to accuse anyone of fraud. if it's not proven or if there's not strong evidence of it, but I think it does raise some questions. So I link over to Christopher Rufo's article, the New York Times article, and Nick Shirley's video. I linked to the YouTube version of the video because it is easier to embed, but as of tonight, his Twitter video has been viewed 136 million times, which is an insane number of people. And so people were talking about what's going on in Idaho. And remember Janus. So I wrote this article about 6 weeks ago about this group called Janus that got its start as a kind of a NGO that was engaged in medical healthcare policy stuff, trying to connect people to doctors and healthcare access and stuff. Somehow over the years, they morphed into this organization that's almost exclusively about refugees. And it's become Janus, which, remember, Janus is the Roman god of doorways and boundaries, and it's literally two-faced. And they take in a bunch of federal subsidies to resettle refugees and to get them started with small businesses like daycares. They also lobby the government for more money. They have this other arm called the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy that releases this report saying that all of these tax cuts over the last 5 years have taken money away from government programs like theirs. And it was interesting that none of the so-called mainstream print news outlets that reposted that press release of theirs, the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy, none of them seem to notice that Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy is very much connected to Janus. It was at one point part of Janus and is now still somehow in the same orbit. So my point was that you have this essentially a hydra. The hydra from mythology had multiple heads, and every time you kill one head, two more sprout up in its place. So instead of the two-faced god, Janus, it's really a hydra is what it is. And one head will lobby the government for more money for things like refugee resettlement. Another head will do public relations saying, hey, these tax cuts are bad because they're taking money away from these vulnerable populations. And then finally, another head goes in and applies for those grants once they're available. And the only, I guess the refugees are making out nicely, but so is the people who work for Janus. That's their living. So go there and check out that article. But, this all builds to the fact that we have, one of the heads, I mentioned one of the heads of the Hydra is called Economic Opportunity. It helps refugees start their own businesses through training and funding. And there was this 2019 column in the Idaho Statesman. It wasn't actually a Statesman article. If you click through it, I got to share the wrong screen. Let me switch the tab here. Screen share. There we go. Locally chained refugees now run 64 daycare centers in Boise. Here are two of them. So this is Jerry Brady, special to the Idaho Statesman. If you scroll down to see what this is, former newspaper publisher, member of Compassionate Boise. So it's not really a Statesman article. It's just a guest thing talking about how great this program is. So Janus Economic Opportunity. With tears in her eyes, Janus Economic Opportunity Director Kate Nelson says, these women inspire by hope for humanity. So basically what they were doing is teaching refugees how to start businesses. Try to go back to my other screen here. There we go. One of the women profiled in that column was Zainab Dalib, who along with her 5 children came to Idaho as a refugee in Somalia from Somalia in 2012. So we have our own Somali refugees here in Idaho. According to records from Transparent Idaho, Dalib was paid more than $350,000 in welfare from July 2019 through June 2023. Little math here, $350,000 divided by 4 years. It's $87,000 a year. That's not a bad living for whatever it is you're doing, is it? And Zainab Dalib was profiled again previously in 2017. Talking about how she found out about the Refugee Childcare Business Development Project under the Idaho Office for Refugees. It helps refugees, mainly single mothers, start their own in-home daycares. The article went on to explain how the system works. So this is from CBS Channel 2 in 2017. These caretakers will watch up to 6 children at a time at their own homes or apartments. All the refugees who go through the program get licensed within the city of Boise or the state. They've all signed up with ICCP, the Idaho Childcare Program. Keep that in mind. ICCP helps working low-income Idaho families. Over 98% of the families who are enrolled in these child cares utilize ICCP program. And there's a shortage of ICCP providers because it's optional for a child care provider to accept ICCP. Mainly, women are involved in the child care project, and most of the time they watch other refugee children. So, stepping back for a minute, what we're seeing here, let's hide the screen share for a second. So what you're seeing in Minnesota is actual fraud. Going to a place, a daycare or a childcare that exists purely in name, purely on paper. Maybe they have a sign out in a building, but you go in there and there's no actual daycare there. But then they're reporting to the state, hey, we've got this many children for this many hours, so we need this many subsidies. That is outright fraud, if that is the case. Now, what we're seeing here in Idaho, and what I discovered when I was researching this, is that it's not necessarily outright fraud. And that's part of the problem here. Because if you focus only on the actual fraud, you might miss the bigger picture of what's happening here. Because what's happening is that you get refugees who are brought in here through programs like Janus, the Idaho Office for Refugees. They get government subsidies to settle refugees from Somalia or from Tanzania, as we'll see in a moment. And they come here, and then oftentimes they do go to work. I'm not saying that they're not necessarily working, but they get these other subsidies to start things like childcare businesses. And once they have those businesses in place, then they collect subsidies multiple ways. They collect subsidies through the Idaho Child Care Program, which subsidizes the children going to the daycare. They also collect subsidies from other sources. And they're also directly collecting welfare themselves, like this Zainab Dalib, who collected $350,000 over the course of 4 years. That's not even counting subsidies going to her daycare. That's just to her personally. So taxpayers are subsidizing folks all over the place. And that's in addition to other things like small business association grants. And there are special grants for people who are minorities. And most of these refugees fall into the status of ethnic minorities, so they get to check that box as well. And so what I'm saying is that it's not necessarily fraudulent. They're following the law. But the law is written in such a way as to divert as much money as possible to refugees or immigrants. And their daycares, it's not like they're opening daycares that are open to the public. Most of these, I'll bet you're not going to be able to go to and enroll your child. First of all, because why would you? There's a big cultural and language gap there. Some of the folks who are running these refugee daycares don't speak English. So of course, if you're just a regular American parent, you're not going to send your child somewhere where they can't speak the language. Let me show you the video here. So after my reporting, Mark Fitzpatrick of Old State Saloon visited one of the daycares, one of the locations that I profiled in this article that we'll get to in a minute. I just want to kind of show you what it looks like on the inside. He did a fairly long video. This is just a few seconds of it.
How do I get my kid in here if I want my kid to be here?
Today I have one kid.
One?
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Yes.
Do you ever have more than one, or is it just one? What happened to the other daycare? They just went out of business?
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going and bothering the people because one, there's going to be a language gap there, and two, I don't necessarily blame them for what's going on. They're brought here. They want a better life from whatever country they're in, Somalia or Tanzania or wherever, the Congo. And so they're brought here as part of this program. And they're given a house and told, okay, here's where you can go to work. And by the way, here you could start your own childcare. You just fill this out, not even fill this out. It's probably filled out for them. They sign off. However they do that. And then they essentially just watch their own children and you can't get subsidies for watching your own children, or at least you're not supposed to, but they'll watch other refugee children as well, friends, family. And that lady there said there was only one. The article I was talking about here said there were up to 6. So my point is, this is not a child care center that's open to the public for just anybody to come and enroll their children. This is a specific thing within a very small insular community. And is that what the child care subsidies were meant to be used for? That's the question. So let's go back to the article here. So the other night, I posted a thread on Twitter that went viral. It had like 100,000 views about another refugee small business owner, Sylvie Mwenamatale. She was another mother of 5. She came to Idaho from Tanzania in 2013, and in 2019, she opened Umoja Daycare in South Boise. And this is a picture of her. I mean, she seems nice enough. Again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions necessarily on the people themselves. My real indictment is of the system. According to Transparent Idaho, Mwenamatale received more than $750,000 in welfare from Idaho taxpayers over a 4-year period, November 2019 to June 2023. That's not even a 4-year period. In 2019, the payments were around $12,000 a month, which is a lot of money. I mean, just stop and think. $12,000 a month, which is the low end of the payment she got a month, but ballooned to more than $30,000 a month by the time records stopped in 2023. For whatever reason, Transparent Idaho, a lot of the records get spotty after 2023. It's like they haven't been fully uploaded or something, or maybe they're categorized differently. But yeah, so over a 3.5-year period, she gets $750,000 in various welfare programs. That's staggering to me. And that's not all. It's a very interesting story that I learned. She had 2 criminal charges against her in 2023, misdemeanors, for operating a daycare in which children were supervised by an unlicensed adult. Because when you work at a daycare, when you open a daycare, you have to get licensed, you have to be inspected, and anybody who works there has to be licensed. Well, apparently she was letting children be supervised by someone who wasn't licensed. If you go to the Idaho Child Care Check website, it turns out they failed several inspections. They actually had their ICCP status terminated. They had been accepting those Idaho Child Care Program payments, but same year, 2023, they had their ability to accept those payments terminated. Maybe because of this unsupervised or unlicensed adult supervising children issue. It doesn't actually say that. I didn't find something connecting those two things, but they happened about the same time. So she failed to file an annual report for Umoja Childcare in 2025. The LLC was terminated in October, and then a collections agency sued her for non-payment of a $12,000 debt, receiving a default judgment. I wouldn't be surprised if she's back in Tanzania by now, or maybe she went somewhere else in Idaho, somewhere else in America, and is doing the same thing again. So the one that Mark Fitzpatrick went to is the Successor Daycare. It's another one that opened up in the same building with a different person. So again, I wouldn't recommend going and harassing people. I'm taking aim at the system here. The system that allowed a refugee from Tanzania to come in, open up a daycare in which she didn't follow all the rules, but was able to not only accept ICCP payments, childcare subsidies from the state, but also get $750,000 in welfare from you, the taxpayer of Idaho. Anyway, you can read the whole thing. You go back to a previous article here. Now it's going to open up in a new tab. Last year and a half ago now, I guess, because it's 2026 now. So back in summer of 24, Alex Adams had just taken over at Department of Health and Welfare, and that government agency had been through a lot of problems under its previous director. They were audited, found that they were misusing government money, doing things that the legislature specifically told them not to do. They were losing track of money. They were going off on all sorts of mission creep, doing pronoun stuff and drug stuff. It was a mess. Alex Adams comes in and he's trying to set things right. And one of the things he finds is that the Idaho childcare program was over budget. And it turns out one of the reasons they went over budget is because they had expanded the pool of people who were eligible for it. They wanted to get more people on subsidies. Let me close this again. And that's one of the structural inherent problems with government welfare, is that the agencies that are administering it, I believe that they come at it from the perspective that success is defined by how many people are on the program. So they want to get more people on these programs, which means expanding eligibility, which means spending more money. So ICCP was over budget, and Adams basically had to restructure the program, and he sent some bills to the legislature in 2025, including some that reduced that threshold for eligibility, once again pulling it back to where it was before. By the way, did you know that there was a bill last year? It was carried in the Senate side by Senator Josh Kaiser from District 20 that reduced the threshold for medical assistance, like Medicaid, for refugees to 133% of the federal poverty line. See, apparently, at some point, they decided that refugees should have a higher threshold. That meant that a refugee making 150%, I believe it was, of the federal poverty line could still qualify for, healthcare subsidies from the state of Idaho and state and federal taxpayers, which again is crazy to me. During debate over that bill, I want to say it was Senator Melissa Wintrow, the Democrat, who argued that we needed to keep those thresholds high because we need to be neighborly. We need to be welcoming to refugees. Reminds me of the Dickens character, the woman who was spending all her time and energy doing philanthropy for Africa while her children were starving and neglected. We got to take care of our own people first, right? And Representative Harris, going back to the Hydra, says you have to cut off the head and cauterize it. Otherwise, that way it can't grow back. And it's true. That's how Hercules defeated the Hydra in Greek mythology. Coming back to, let me finish up this story. So I wrote about ICCP last year, and there's the Senate committee debate that I mentioned. You had refugees getting up and testifying against the bill. I'm not quite sure if they fully understood what it was about, but they were coming in and pleading with the senators not to take away their benefits. It's interesting. I have a video clip here. Following Nick Shirley's expose of the Minnesota stuff, there was this press conference with refugees and refugee organization employees, these NGOs that resettle refugees. And they had it looked like a refugee or immigrant woman reading a script from her phone. And, well, watch what happens when she misspeaks.
If childcare is cut, I'm unable to work or go to school. I understand fraud is bad.
So fraud is bad, right? I've no idea exactly what she was reading or what went through her head in that moment. See all sorts of speculation on social media. Was she not supposed to say the word fraud? That doesn't make sense because why is it in the script? I don't know. But it does kind of reinforce what I'm saying, is that the refugees themselves, the immigrants themselves, they're not masterminding this. They're taking advantage of what's available. And honestly, in the cultures they come from, that's normal. That's expected. That's what you do. That's how you get ahead. And to an extent, we do it here too. If there's a loophole in the tax law that your business can take advantage of to reduce your tax burden, of course you're going to take it, right? It's legal. It's not. It's laudable to pay as little taxes as you can. In this case, though, this takes it the other direction, taking advantage of loopholes to get subsidies, to get benefits. And I guess the saying, don't hate the player, hate the game, applies here. If all that happens as a result of this expose is that some Somali daycare owners in Minnesota get fined or deported or go to jail, that's not going to fix the problem. The problem is a system that's been created. The problem is subsidies that flow from the taxpayer through the government, through NGOs like Janus, to various interested parties. And at every level of that, there's opportunities for exploitation. I'm going to go back here on gemstatechronicle.com here because I followed up. On Monday, I wrote about the raising questions. On Tuesday, I followed that up by saying that the point of this is that the system is designed to be exploited. It's designed to be abused. The NGO industrial complex has created a massive bureaucratic system to import refugees and other foreign nationals into our communities, providing them with countless streams of taxpayer money every step of the way. Democrats and Republicans alike are complicit in creating and maintaining this system. Consider the response of Congressman Tom Emmer, the House Majority Whip and representative of Minnesota's 6th District. He had you can read it there. You can go there and read it. He had very tough talk. He's going to deport all these people who were involved in this. Our nation will not tolerate those who take advantage of our charity. Tough talk sounds great, but Emmer co-founded the House Somalia Caucus in 2015 with then Congressman and now Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. So he was complicit in bringing these people here. He was complicit in setting up the system that they're taking advantage of now. And he's talking tough now because he wants to cover up his role in it. Oilfield Rando, a Twitter anon, he digs into information about where federal money is going. And he found that we've got this bill sitting in the House, a funding bill for health and human services. The House wants to give $4.3 billion next year to refugee resettlement. And the House or the Senate wants $5.6 billion. So with Republicans like these, who needs Democrats? So that's what's going on. Check it out. Go read that there. There's a couple other articles on the same subject. This has been what everybody's talking about. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess, on the 31st, Senator Brian Almon and Representative Josh Tanner sent a letter to Department of Health and Welfare calling for the pause for certain grants going to childcare. There we go. So, request to pause $14 million childcare grant disbursements from Senate Bill 1206 pending fraud prevention matters. So this started its own little tempest in a teapot here. Oh, funny. Hey, look at that. Those are the mobile buttons, but because I zoomed in so far, it thinks it's a mobile screen now. So, yeah, those are for the benefit of people on mobile. Nice big buttons for you to tap with your finger. So anyway, they're basically requesting that the Department of Health and Welfare cease disbursements authorized by Senate Bill 1206 until we can get a handle on things to make sure it's not going to the wrong spot. And in fact, there we go, 100%. Let me share an image with you. There we go. Kind of awkward on this screen here. But I saw this on Twitter today. It's allegedly from the Department of Health and Welfare to various stakeholders saying that certain grants through ICCP and other programs are not going to go out yet. So I guess the letter from Senator Almon and Representative Tanner got results. There we go. So yeah, now this did cause a little bit of a kerfuffle as various political actors used this as an excuse to go after anybody who voted yes on Senate Bill 1206. And so because of that, I went ahead and wrote an article yesterday just looking at, okay, what is Senate Bill 1206? And basically it was a multifaceted bill. As part of Alex Adams' reorganization of health and welfare, he took the Idaho childcare program and moved it out of the self-reliance programs, which is the ironically named system of welfare. It's called self-reliance. Go figure. Moved ICCP out of that and moved it to a completely new division called, was it the Division of Early Learning and Development. So there were multiple bills that were part of this restructuring. Some of them moved different budgets from one place to another. Others moved employees from one place to another. Others kind of restructured the way that the subsidies were handled. And remember that ICCP grants are actually federal money that goes through, a lot of it is federal money that goes through the state, and then the state just decides how to disperse it. So this $14 million, it was already there in federal money. Senate Bill 1206 just says, okay, here's how we're actually going to use it. And what it basically put strings on the money, saying that it was going to be, had to be used for startup. So it couldn't be used for existing daycares. It couldn't be used just to subsidize them. It was to help people start their own daycares, whether they're, refugees or citizens or whatever. And it was kind of hand in hand with another bill here, House Bill 243. Someone's asking, when did the legislature vote to create the ICCP program? If you go back to my article from a year and a half ago, where I first talked about ICCP, it actually came out of a federal bill. It was in 1990. President George H.W. Bush signed a bill. It was a massive bill. And what it's remembered for is breaking his promise of not raising taxes. Remember, at the 1988 Republican convention, when he's running for president, he says, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And then in 1990, he raises taxes. But part of that, though, was the creation of this block grant that the federal government would give out chunks of money to states to subsidize childcare. And it was up to the states to decide exactly how to disperse that. So the ICCP, I believe it was created sometime in the 1990s, so forever ago. There's nobody left in the legislature who was there when it was first created. It's just been this thing. As I think, was it Reagan or Milton Friedman said, the closest thing to eternal life is a government program. So it is there. And that's the question I'll get to before we get done here is, should it be? But I just want to play a couple clips from the debate on Senate Bill 1206 to explain why they decided to do what they did. Now, you can still disagree with it, by all means. But for me, it's always important to get as much context as possible. So I'll start with Representative Tanner, who was the House sponsor of the bill.
The other thing that I'd point out in this one would be the $14 million federal fund that was given to Idaho for child care aspects. But Idaho, instead of just doing the normal thing and just using it as a supplemental aspect to supplement, we actually kind of flipped it around and we actually use it as a more innovative way to fund a program. So the new director went ahead and shifted it more to where we focus more on businesses themselves, getting a lot of these businesses off the ground. If you all remember House Bill 243 that came through, and this was the child care policy that dealt with the rules of childcare and childcare facilities, again, was a deregulation aspect. So we've now deregulated. We view innovative ways to actually build this marketplace up, to hopefully stabilize the market, to show the rest of the world that deregulation actually works in a sense of, but in the meantime, we're going to offer the stability to actually build the businesses up. More of those individual businesses, like the stay-at-home mom that wants to start a business. So by doing this, I think we will see childcare, the business numbers go up, which the costs will go down, which will hopefully help everybody in the state of Idaho that has kids. Hopefully helps them be able to have more options within daycares, but also potentially more money back in their pockets to deal with other issues with.
All right. And also on the Senate side, Senator Cody Galloway, I thought, explained well why people were supporting this.
Senator Galloway.
To debate the bill.
You have the floor.
I just want to talk for a few minutes about the $14 million for the child care federal grants. In the past, we've seen lots of child care subsidies, and those are not super popular in this building. But this is a different approach to childcare, and we know that we have a childcare shortage. And what this allows is the Idaho free market to grow in this area. And I'm just going to give you one hypothetical example of what this money could actually be used for. So again, it's federal grant money that's coming no matter what. It's not Idaho state tax dollars. Well, they paid their federal taxes, but it's not general fund money. And what they can do with this is, let's say that there's a mom in a neighborhood who wants to open an in-home childcare. She could apply for a grant at Health and Welfare, and maybe the grant is for startup costs to creating a safe childcare in her home where she could take neighborhood kids in. And maybe the grant would be to fence her yard in and maybe build a play structure. Let's say it's $3,000 to $5,000. So small little amounts of money that allow maybe stay-at-home moms or people that want to help address the childcare shortage that we have by starting small businesses and helping them be successful here in Idaho to create additional slots for kiddos that need safe places to play. And I just encourage your yes vote because I really like the approach of helping small businesses start as opposed to increasing subsidies and those kind of things. So that's all.
Thank you, Senator, Representative. So yeah, again, you could definitely disagree with that. I think that Senate Bill 1206 was a bad idea. What's interesting is that during the debate on it, nobody actually debated against it. It came up in the Senate on April 1st, in the House on April 2nd. So it was at the very end of the session. In fact, they rushed it through. They, passed the bill out of JFAC the morning of April 1st, and then suspended the rules so that they could of debate and vote on it right away. Everybody, it's always at the end of the session. Everybody just wants to be done. And of course, that's when you really need to pay attention to what they're pushing through. But what's interesting is that, both Senator Galloway there said that this would be good for helping, like a stay-at-home mom start a daycare business. And Representative Tanner was pointing out that House Bill 234, which had already passed, which loosened the regulations of childcare in Idaho, meant that now, because the whole point of doing that was to get more daycares, more childcares operational, because there's a supply problem here. There's more demand for childcare than supply, which makes it expensive and hard to get to. Now, I'm going to get to the higher level question of whether we should be subsidizing it and what the best setup for society is in a minute. But this is just the facts on the ground that they're operating with. Okay, we've loosened up the regulations. We want to spur more of them to be opened up. So we're going to take this federal money and direct it toward these specific things for starting up these daycares. Now, what was interesting is that at the time, the idea of people defrauding the system or refugees taking advantage of the system, I don't think was on anybody's radar because nobody brought it up. Nobody mentioned it. That was not part of the debate. When Idaho Freedom Foundation, they gave that bill a -2 because it continued to subsidize childcare and because it increased reliance on federal funds. Those were their two minuses. It didn't say anything about the potential for, refugees or immigrants or other people defrauding the system. That was not on anyone's radar. So that's the truth about Senate Bill 1206 and its relationship to what's going on. Now, a fellow here is who pointed out when did the legislature vote to create ICCP, says it never actually created it, and that's true. While Senator Galloway and Representative Tanner were speaking, I was doing some reading on the other screen. The legislature never actually came in and said we're going to subsidize childcare. Like I said, it was the federal program, the block grants, as part of that 1990 bill signed by the first President Bush, and then Title 56, Chapter 2 of Idaho Code essentially gives the Director of Health and Welfare leeway in setting rules on how to manage public assistance, including federal grants. And according to ChatGPT here, since I didn't have time to sit down and research it all myself, there were rules in 1996 and 1997 regarding rules for health and welfare for administering the Idaho Child Care Program. So again, it has been around for nearly 30 years in Idaho. But Mr. Westrider here is correct that there was never actually a vote by the legislature to create the program. It's just like so many things nowadays, so many things since the 1930s, since the New Deal era. The legislature never said we're going to do this program. The legislature told the director of health and welfare, go do what you need to do. And the director of health and welfare, whoever that was at the time, says, okay, well, there's this federal program available. We're going to do it. And the legislature could have rejected that rule at the time. I don't know if the system for legislative oversight of administrative rules was the same in 1996 as it is now. I do know it used to be you only had to get one chamber to approve your rule. Now, over the last couple of years, they changed that. So you have to get both chambers. So you still have to get the House and the Senate to approve a rule, which is good. But once a rule's in place, and this is something I wrote a lot about during the last session, once a rule's in place, it's very hard to get rid of, because you can actually pass a resolution saying we're getting rid of this rule, but stakeholders could then sue saying, well, according to the law, the only reason you can get rid of a rule is if you find that the rule does not actually comply with the law. If the rule complies with the law, but you just don't like it, you could end up having a judge overturn that. It gets very murky and very difficult, which is why it was so important that so many rules were being moved into statute, which was happening last year. It's going to happen some more this year, I'm pretty sure, where they're taking these rules from the Idaho Administrative Procedures Act, taking the rules and taking them out of that and putting them into the law. Because once it's in the law, the legislature can do whatever they want with it. They can run a bill, and as long as they get 36 representatives, 18 senators, and one governor to agree, they can change that law. And the court can't come and say, hey, you're not allowed to do that, because that's exactly what the legislature is allowed to do. So yeah, that's really interesting about the origins of the Idaho child care program there. So go read the whole thing. It's about Senate Bill 1206 and how it relates to everything that's going on here. What happens next? That's the real question. Let me see. I had a couple of clips here. Alex Adams was the director of health and welfare when all that started. Well, then he got poached by the Trump administration, and now he's the assistant secretary for the administration of children and families under RFK Jr. at Health and Human Services at the federal level. And he's been involved in this, in the investigation of this daycare fraud. This is what he had to say, along with the deputy secretary, just the other day.
Hello, I'm HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill. I'm here with Assistant Secretary Alex Adams. Alex oversees the Administration for Children and Families. Intrepid journalists have made shocking and credible allegations of extensive fraud in Minnesota's child care programs. We believe the state of Minnesota has allowed scammers and fake daycares to siphon millions of taxpayer dollars over the past decade.
My office, ACF, provides Minnesota $185 million in child care funds each year. That money should be helping 19,000 American children, including toddlers and infants. Any dollar stolen by fraudsters is stolen from those children. Yesterday, I spoke directly with the director of the Minnesota Child Care Services Office. She could not tell me with confidence whether those allegations of fraud are isolated or whether there's fraud stretching statewide.
Today, we have taken 3 direct actions against the blatant fraud that seems to be rampant in Minnesota. First, I have activated our Defend the Spend system for all ACF child care payments across America. Starting today, we require a justification, receipt, or photo evidence before we make a payment. Second, I have just signed and sent a demand letter to Governor Walz. I required a full 360 review of these centers. This includes attendance records, licenses, complaints, investigations, and inspections.
And third, we've launched a dedicated fraud reporting hotline and email address at childcare.gov. Whether you're a parent, a provider, a member of the public, we want to hear from you. Let me be crystal clear. ACF expects every state to uphold the highest standards of oversight, monitoring, and accountability for federal dollars. Minnesota is no exception.
We're committed to holding bad actors accountable. Regardless of rank or office, anyone who's involved in perpetrating this fraud against the American people should expect to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
So there you go. Idaho's own Alex Adams is making waves now nationwide, trying to get to the bottom of this fraud in Minnesota. And there was another article that came out right after that that says they're not just pausing payments to Minnesota, they're pausing payments to every state, which means that $14 million that Representative Tanner and Senator Lenny called to be halted, paused here, could be paused anyway from the source, from the federal government. And by the way, one more thing about Senate Bill 1206. I'm told by people in the know that none of that 14 million has actually been dispersed yet. So it's not like Senate Bill 1206 was enabling fraud at this point. But I do think it is prudent to pause it and see what's going on, because there's obviously things going on. And like I said, people around the country are digging into their own states. Here in Idaho, a lot of people are digging into daycare centers and subsidies, business information. If you go over on X, on Twitter, Brandy Parody and Lauren Walker are 24/7 right now, just doing the research on the back end, figuring out who's getting subsidies and how much, because that's really the question. I think, like I said, I don't necessarily recommend going and harassing anybody in person, but we as taxpayers, we as citizens, do have a vested interest in knowing where our tax dollars are going. And there's multiple levels there. Obviously, there's folks who say we shouldn't be subsidizing at all, and honestly, I'm one of them. But even if you believe that it's right for us to be subsidizing childcare, that there's people who just need help and they need to be able to work, single mothers, whatever, even if you believe that, you have to believe that we need to have safeguards to ensure that that money is actually going where it's meant to, that it's going to help somebody who can't make ends meet and is working 12 hours a day and can't afford childcare. Otherwise they'd be on the streets homeless or something, whatever. If that's the case, okay, fine. But if a refugee from Tanzania is getting $750,000, then I think we should know that. And I think we should have reforms ready to fix that. Now, at the deeper level, Wayne Hoffman, my former boss, he wrote an article the other day saying that as we're talking about fraud and safeguards and subsidies, nobody's asking the question, why are we actually subsidizing daycare? And he goes into the moral case as to why it's actually a bad idea. Daycare itself is not necessarily the best environment for children. I say that as somebody who went to daycare when I was a child because I'm a single mother. It wasn't good for me. Now, your mileage may vary. I'm sure there's great daycares out there. And I know there are people, obviously, in where that's in situations where that's the only alternative. But I think where Wayne was getting at, go check out his Substack, leveluphumanity.substack.com, I think it is that our whole system, our whole society is structured in the wrong way. Incentives are all wrong. The path of least resistance is all wrong. It's set up to push us in directions that are not good for us as people, not good for children, not good for society. And I agree with all of that. The question is how to get from point A to point B. If the legislature just terminated the Idaho child care program immediately, tomorrow, well, next week when the session starts, there would probably be people who that would be catastrophic to them. They would be, suddenly unable to pay for childcare, which meant they would not be able to go to work, which means they, could end up on the street. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. Even the refugees who have come and are taking advantage of the system, we don't want to just pull the rug out from under them, because that can be chaotic. That can destroy lives. So what do? We need an off ramp. This is something that former Senator Steve Thane, who he was the chairman of District 14 right before me. He's actually talked about a lot and makes a lot of sense. Is that if you want to unwind these programs, you have to do so in such a way where you give people outs. You have to give people these off ramps from these systems. And I agree with that. So how do we do that? And I think the first step is exposing fraud, because that makes it obvious to everybody. Obviously, you're going to have your true believers in the Democrat Party, people like the Attorney General of the state of Washington, who's telling people to stop harassing, it's a hate crime to investigate these things, or Governor Tim Walz, who says it's white supremacy to investigate these things. Obviously, you're going to have those people. But for folks in the center here in Idaho, your moderate Republicans who believe that there's a place for these subsidies. First, we convince them that, look, the system is being abused. It's being exploited in some ways that are outright fraudulent and illegal, and in other ways that are just against the spirit of what it was meant to do. So that's step one. Okay, this has some problems. We need to fix them. And then once we fix those, okay, then we can step back and assess, okay, now how do we make people more self-reliant? You know, that ironic name of the for health and welfare's welfare programs, the self-reliance programs. How do we actually make people more self-reliant? How do we pull government away, pull those subsidies away in such a way that doesn't pull the rug out from people, it doesn't lead to chaos, but nudge people in the direction of being more self-reliant and less reliant on government? Because people who are reliant on government, you know, our welfare state doesn't build people up. You know, when they were first debating it, whether Social Security in the 1930s or Medicare and you know, the various other welfare programs in the 1960s, the idea was, okay, we're just going to give people a hand up, not a handout. But it turns out to be a handout, and people, you know, entire generations get on these welfare programs and stay on there for, you know, their entire lives. There's people who were born into welfare, grow up in it, and die on it. And that's not good for society, and it's not good for the human spirit either to be completely dependent like that. So that's a debate I want to see. You go back to chronicle.com, gemstatechronicle.com, and that was really my article yesterday going into it. You know, as Wayne said, these may address immediate failures, but they rarely prompt a deeper conversation about whether the underlying system makes sense in the first place. Should we at least be willing to ask whether a society built around early subsidized separation of children from parents is the best arrangement for families, communities, or children themselves? And I totally agree. So go check it out. You know, go check out everything else. Like I said, I've been covering this issue for, you know, just trying to dig into it. I don't want to just hit the shallow points or the outrage bait. That's not how I do things. I want to really dig into the issue and figure out what's going on, why it's going on, how it relates to our policies, and how we can change it. How can we fix this? And the legislature comes into session in just over a week, so hopefully they will take that opportunity to start fixing this. I don't think this issue is going away. I think this has really touched a nerve in the American people like few things have. You know, we're looking at the economy. We're looking at the younger generations, Generation Z, and the ones coming up after them, who really are the first generations to have it worse than their parents. Now, that's not how America's supposed to work. And yet they're coming into a world where they can't buy a house, can't get a job. Everything, the deck seems stacked against them. And this is part of the reason, because we're taking tax dollars and giving them to, you know, everyone else. And I imagine for people in that situation, you know, people who are 20, 21, 23, 25 years old, looking at a very bleak outlook on life, that must be infuriating. And so I don't think this is going to go away. I don't think it's going to just fade away. People are going to forget it. To make something real happen from this, we have to stay focused. Don't get distracted on the rabbit trails. I mean, it's amusing to, you know, see the various clips or see the pictures of the Quality Learning Center and the other misspellings that we've seen. But we need to stay focused on the system. It's the system itself that we need to fix, that we need to reform. And to do that, we need information. So, you know, go check out Lauren Walker on Twitter. She's shows you how you can actually help find information. And then we can submit that information to, you know, government authorities. If you check out the homepage of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare right now, it looks like this. Maybe like this. Up at the top, it says DHW takes the stewardship of public programs seriously. Fraud of any kind is not tolerated. If you suspect fraud, please report it. Tips can be submitted confidentially. Protecting public resources helps ensure services remain available for the Idaho children and families who truly need them. Report suspected fraud here. So now I can't guarantee that they'll do a good job of investigating, but the option is there. If you think something is wrong, if you see a misspelled sign on a daycare center in your city, well, send it over to them and see what they have to say. I'm sure the tax commission would also be interested in learning about it. If there's issues with businesses' licenses, then the Secretary of State's office might be interested in hearing it. And of course, contact your legislators. And if you want to talk to your legislators, figure out how to contact them, then I recommend Idaho Insider, legislative branch or districts. Find out your legislators. Or if you want to go straight to a committee, go to legislative committees. The health and welfare committees are the ones who are overseeing a lot of this. So go to the House Health and Welfare, go to Senate Health and Welfare, and you can just use the email the committee button and let them know what you think. Be polite, be respectful, be informative, give them something, give them action items that they can actually do. Don't just yell at them. That doesn't really accomplish much. So yeah. Jennifer here says, I hope it doesn't fade away. My kids are in that generation. Yeah, my children are, not quite that old. They're going to be in the next generation coming up. And that's really why I'm doing everything I do, is that I'm looking ahead to the world that my children will inherit and their children someday. And the things we do will affect them at that point as well. Like we were talking about earlier, the ICCP program came about in 1990. I was just a child then. And they created this program that's now being exploited, at the very least. Some rule was submitted by the Department of Health and Welfare in the mid-1990s, and here we are still dealing with it. So that's you can look at that both ways. One, it's frustrating that we're still dealing with perhaps the mistakes of the past, even if they had good intentions, but also the things we do today. What we do today can have an impact 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now. So keep that in mind. Always be positive. Always be looking towards the ultimate goal of why we're doing what we're doing. So I think that's enough for today. Probably not going to be here next Friday because it's the Idaho GOP winter meeting. So I will be there. It's just down the road from me in Meridian. But the whole Republican Party of Idaho, the state central committee, is getting together to discuss rules and resolutions. I'll have some articles about that, about the different rules and resolutions that we're considering and how they might affect things going forward, especially the resolutions that look like they have a chance of being picked up as legislation, because that's the point of a resolution. We say, okay, we as a party, this is what we want to see. And then it's up to the people who carry it to then take it to legislators and say, oh, look, the Republican Party says we want this. Let's make it happen. So stay tuned for that. And then Monday the 12th, my birthday, is the first day of the legislative session. That's going to be a very big day, and I will bring you as much coverage as possible, not only here on the Chronicle, but also on Idaho Signal. So watch for that as well. So I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, and thank you to all who caught this not live, but it's been great. Have a good rest of your evening. Have a great weekend, and have a happy new year.